بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأفضل الصلوات وأتم التسليم على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين سيد الأولين والآخرين، حبيبنا وسيدنا وشفيعنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن استنى بسنته وسار على نهجه إلى يوم الدين، وارض اللهم عنا معهم اللهم آمين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا خالصا لوجهك صوابا لسنة نبيك. اللهم اجعل أعمالنا كلها صالحة واجعلها لوجهك خالصة ولا تجعل لأحد غيرك فيها شيئا. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه ولا تجعله ملتبسا علينا فنضل. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. We discussed last lesson, or we went through last lesson, the 10 sub-articulation points of the tongue, starting from the qaf and ending with the group that was seen sad zay. And in terms of detailed and thorough explanation, we got up to Ra, as far as I can remember. Inshallah ta'ala would be carrying on from there. We have 3 more groups of letters to go through. The Ta, Ta, Dal, Tha, Tha, Wa, and Sin, Zay, Sad. After that, inshallah ta'ala, that would be all of the letters of the tongue. It will be critical at this point, since all of the letters that are left are grouped into sub-categories of articulation, that we understand the importance of characteristics. The characteristics of the letters are largely, perhaps not wholly, but largely, what makes distinct letters that come from the same articulation point. Otherwise, they'd be all the same letter, and we obviously know that that cannot be the case. Every letter in the Arabic language is unique, and if you end up pronouncing 2 letters in the same manner, know for sure that you're making a mistake in one of them. To get into it then, inshallah. طيب, the Ta, the Dal, and the Ta. All of the aforementioned letters, those 3 letters, come from the tip of the tongue being in contact with with where الثنايا meet the gums. الثنايا being the incisors. To be more specific, it is not simply or vaguely the tip of the tongue, it is the belly of the tip of the tongue. So it is not the tip of the tongue, i.e. this part of the tongue, it is the tip of the tongue, meaning this part. And this will become clearer, especially when we discuss tha, dhal, and wa, as it will be the case that's actually this part of the tip that is being used with those letters. Going back to this though, the ta, ta, and dal, all three of them have been grouped into this one makhraj. That is the belly of the tip of the tongue in contact with the gums where the incisors meet or join the top of the mouth. For the ta, ta, ti, tu, at, ta, ti, tu, at. For the dal, da, di, du, ad, da, di, du, ad. And for the ta, ta, tu, ti, ato. Ta, tu, ti, ato. Now, question is, actually before we get to that, we will go through some common mistakes to do with each one of the three letters. With the ta, it is very easy to say, specifically due to its hams, and we'll get that into that more when we get to characteristics. It is very easy to say ta, ti, tu, at. Ta, ti, tu, at. It's a common mistake, specifically among English speakers, as one of the views are, as well as North Africans. So ta, tu, ti, at is a mistake. The reason being, if I am to say ta, tu, ti, at, what's actually happening is that the makhraj is not from the point indicated in the diagram, ta, tu, ti, at. It is in fact the head of the tip of the tongue that comes in contact with or comes behind the الثنايا السفلى and العليا. That sound there, it would look like this. This is obviously incorrect. I'm just showing it for demonstration. The tongue would be like so, and the teeth would be like so. First, the ta makhraj would be met, and then that sound that you hear in the end, the seen sound, the incorrect seen sound, comes due to the fact that there is still air flowing whilst the tip of the tongue is close to the thanaya. This is an incorrect makhraj, and it is an incorrect ta. One cannot say tatafakkarun. Tatafakkarun is incorrect. Tatafakkarun. Specifically in the one with sukoon, actually, because obviously the hams is more pronounced when that has sukoon. So إذا السماء انفطرت. That's incorrect once again. That seen sound is completely false. It must not be pronounced when a ta is pronounced. Ultimately, this is an incorrect application of hams, and we'll get to that. We'll get to it in characteristics of the letters. But it is also significant to mention this in makharij, because what's ultimately happening is that the tongue is transitioning from the makhraj of the ta to the makhraj of the seen, which we will mention in a second, inshallah ta'ala. The dal, it is a straightforward letter, but a common mistake amongst the East Africans or Somalians is that hams was once again applied with it, making its nature, the sound that comes out, very close to the ta. And this is incredibly problematic, as it can change whole words eventually. Saying Maliki Yawmi Deen, Deen, this is a big problem. الدين دين and teen teen are two completely different words. One means religion or recompense, the other means fig. So the one who says Malik Yawm al-Din wal-'iyadhu billah is saying owner of the day of figs. Wal-'iyadhu billah. Obviously the meaning is completely corrupted and completely changed. But this is something that we must watch out for, and once again it's more related to our characteristics, but the relevance still stands somewhat in terms of makharij. One thing I will mention with regards to the dal, yes, it is, those three letters are grouped together in one makhraj, as we just discussed. The dal does have more contact with al-thanaya al-ulya than the ta'ud. So saying ta, that's all gums. That's all litha. Ta. And it's very slightly, only very slightly, if at all, in contact with thanaya. Da. The tongue ever so slightly shifts forward, such that the head of the tip is actually only in contact with thanaya. And this makhraj, in my opinion, is ever so slightly different from the one mentioned from a ta, hence changing the sound. So it's not just a matter of sifat here, in my opinion, it is also a matter of a very slight, minute change in makhraj. So saying da, ta, da, tu, du, ti, di, at, ad. If you try that yourself, what you may find is that with the ta, it is, the makhraj is like so. With the dal, the head of the tip is more in contact with a thanaya. Hence there's this sharpness or strength in the makhraj, more so than the ta. Because obviously the teeth are harder than the gums. Wallahu a'lam. This is just my stipulation. طيب, so that's the ta and the dal. The ta, this will change slightly, not here so much, even though we'll get to that in a second, but much more here. And this is, as we mentioned in the ra, it is to do with the characteristic of isti'la. Isti'la is when a letter has highness, quite literally. It is a heavy letter, to put in more practical terms. In the heavy letters, or with the heavy letters, or with any heavy sound, the back of the tongue is raised. We'll discuss this briefly and we'll keep the details for discussion on sifat, inshallah. But if I was to say ta, the tongue would not be the same as it was before, but it would be much more like this. I'll do both of them. So whilst this would be, whilst this dotted line is the position of the tongue when pronouncing the ta and the dal, this one will be the position when pronouncing the ta. And you can try this for yourself once again, and I invite you to do so. Saying ta, da, the back of the tongue is somewhat flat. Ta, the back of the tongue is now higher. Hence isti'la, literally highness. This is not so much to do with makhraj, because this does not change that much. We mentioned that in a second, but it's to do with characteristics. طيب, what about the makhraj? Is it exactly the same as the other two? What I would personally say is that there's ever so slight change once again, in the sense that instead of only one point or a smaller portion of the tip of the tongue, the head of the tip, being in contact with the litha, it is rather a higher spread. So if you can imagine, this is the tongue, whilst this is the part that's being in contact with the litha and the thanaya in the ta and the dal, it is more this that is in contact with the ta, i.e. the tongue is more spread out. The makhraj itself is more spread out. try to demonstrate this here. So if this is button at-taraf, as we said, this is more or less, or perhaps a bit higher, where the makhraj of the ta and the dal come from. It is more this, it is a makhraj of the ta. Whilst it is the same point of contact, there's just a slightly more higher spread, as well as obviously the fact that the back of the tongue is raised. So it would be, instead of ta, tu, ti, at, da, du, di, ad, ta, tu, ti, at. You can try this for yourself. So saying ta, 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 there is somewhat a slight spread of the point of contact. Perhaps not as exaggerated as I made it out to be here, but it is very slight and it is felt somewhat. Ta, 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 ta. Ti, ti, ti. Tu, tu, tu. An ever so slight spread of the tongue as opposed to a single point. As well as this, once again, all the differences that we're discussing now are very, very slight. They're nowhere near as severe a difference as the qaf and the kaf, for example, or as the ra and the lam, or the dad and the lam, or whatever else. Whereas the others are very distinct and very different from one another, these are much more subtle, which is why many of the scholars grouped them into one makhraj. We're trying to explain, obviously, why there is a difference of sound, while it's not getting too in depth in Sufat, as that is sound top. As well as the slight spread, there is a slight pullback in the tongue. So once again, if this is the makhraj of the ta and the dal, here is the makhraj of the ta. Very slight, but somewhat felt different. So ta, 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 ta. Ever so slight, ever so slight. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. So we'll say them one more time. Ta, tu, ti, at, da, du, di, ad, ta, tu, ti, at. جميل. طيب. Next up, inshallah ta'ala, are, by the way, don't worry about how open the mouth is. Technically, it should be a lot closer than it is. It's just the crudeness of the diagram. So this is, technically inaccurate. So don't pay too much attention to that. The next makhraj is that of the sa, the dal, and the wa. This makhraj comes from ra's al-taraf, or the head of the tip, in contact with the tip of the thanaya. So the tip of the front teeth, or the thanaya, and the tip of the tongue, when in contact, so these are the teeth and this is the tongue, this makhraj is where the tha, the dal, and Allah come from. Jameel. So we'll go through them quickly. Tha, thu, thi, as, the, dhu, the, as, la, wu, li, al. Jameel. So what is the difference then? How come there is a difference in sound? Once again, why it's not delving too much into sifat, we will say the following. With the tha, it is practically identical in makhraj to the dha. What's the difference then? How come this sounds very unique from that? With the tha, there is no working of the vocal cords, so to speak. It is literally just exhaling. So if you're exhaling or exiting air from your mouth, whilst keeping your tongue in that position, a tha is going to come out. So it's not, there is not, the sound is not one that is jahri. Once again, this is to do with the sifat. It is a hamsi sound. As hams, not jah. So you say, as. Once you get to the fatha, dhamma or kasra after, so tha, thu, thi, then obviously your vocal cords are in play. But just that sound in itself, there is no actual vocal cord, or your voice is not put in play. It's just an exhale of air. Now, that same makhraj, putting your voice into action and keeping the same makhraj and the pressure in the same area, adha comes out. So, without any vocal cord, I'm not changing the position of my tongue at all. It's exactly the same. The only thing that I'm changing is that in one case with the tha, I'm simply exhaling. With the dhal, I'm actually saying, I'm making a voice with my vocal cords, a noise, a sound. Right? This, in my opinion, is the primary difference between the tha and the dhal. So saying and saying, the main difference between those two is simply the activity of the vocal cords. طيب, what about the dhal and the dha? Once again, it is practically identical makhraj. The only difference is, you guessed it, the back of the tongue. The back of the tongue is what dictates a sound as heavy or light, or full mouth or empty mouth. So this is more of a dha position, to be honest with you. If it was a dhal or a tha, it would be a bit more like this. So the, dha, the, dha, the, dha. The only thing that's changing is the back of the tongue. And once again, I invite you all to try this, and hopefully you'll find this to be the case. That whilst you're not changing anything to do with the tip of the tongue, the only thing that's changing is the position of the back of the tongue. You're able to change the sound from a the to a dha. So the, la, dhu, dhu, the, the. Makhraj exactly the same. The only thing that's changing is the position of the back of the tongue. Jameel. Common mistakes then. This is very different, very difficult to spot, or very easy rather, to spot for visually. But if you were to simply listen, let's say there's a barrier, or you can see the person's mouth, it's a recording, whatever the case may be. There are those who can get away with a sound close to a tha and a sound close to a dhal by doing the following. So if I don't show my mouth and do a fake tha, try to spot the difference yourself. So if I say correct one, tha, thu, thi. If I say tha, fu, thi. Some of you may have got it straight away, some or others may not have. It's a fa. It's actual not. The sound is very similar for the same reasons that we just discussed, that the activity of the vocal cords is absent in both of them. But the actual makhraj itself is different. Whilst the makhraj of the fa is here, the fa is from the lips or the lower lips and the thanaya al-ulya, but we'll get to that when you get to it. The makhraj is different. The sound, you can say, is somewhat similar. Likewise, the dhal, if I say the, dhu, the, that's the correct dhal. If I say the incorrect one, the, dhu, that's actually a V sound. I was making a V sound. So you can think of it that way. A fake tha is a fa, and a fake dhal is a dha, or V sound. The V sound, of course, doesn't exist in Arabic in the first place. So that's a mistake upon a mistake. Not only are you changing a letter, you're changing a sound to that which doesn't exist in the Arabic language in the first place. So be wary of that. It is completely unacceptable. It is not the correct letter. Even if the sound may be somewhat similar, it is not the correct letter. And it would be a major mistake to say a tha for a tha or a dha for a dha. Other mistakes is excessively, actually, or just simply sticking the tongue out for any of those three letters. Saying is incorrect. It is ugly, both in sound and appearance. It is not something that Arabs do. It is not necessary for the sound in the first place. Just this will produce the correct sound. Having this excessive tongue out is not correct, and it is qabih. It is ugly. So those two main issues are mistake. There's one more, I think. Oh yeah. As we're going to get to it in a second, the zay, z, is often pronounced instead of a dhal by inexperienced reciters. So when you say al-lazina, this is completely unacceptable because it's changing a letter for another letter. And can be avoided by simply striking the correct makhraj. As we're going to explain in a second for the sin, sad, and zay. They come from a different spot. Very simple. So it's simply an issue of finding the correct makhraj. Nothing more, nothing less. And it's a very obvious change in sound. Not as subtle perhaps as the and the, which if you're not looking at the person directly, you may be fooled. But the and the, there's no mistaking it. There's no mistaking it at all. So that's all for the makhraj, insha'Allah ta'ala. The final collective makhraj is that of the sin, sad, and zay, or sin, zay, and sad. Zay, perhaps it actually makes sense for me to change that as well and make the mouth more closed, specifically as it will be relevant for this makhraj. طيب. The zay, sin, and sad are pronounced once again from the tip of the tongue, or ra's al-taraf, just behind الثنايا السفلى, all the lower incisors. The lower incisors, not the top ones. So you'd say za, zu, zi, sa, su, si, sa, su, si. As, s, s. طيب ف having your tongue in this position allows the air in all three cases to flow freely, or the sound rather, to flow freely with a nice clear passage. This group of letters, in fact, are referred to as huruf as-safir, or the letters of whistling, for obvious reasons. As, as. It is a sifa that only those three letters have. It's a characteristic. Even though we said we won't get too much into characteristics, it's appropriate since they're all grouped in the same makhraj and have the same characteristic. So those three letters are referred to as huruf as-safir, or the letters of whistling, have a whistling characteristic. طيب, so what is it that makes each one different from the other? Very much like the tha and the the difference between the sin and the zay is the fact that for one there is an activity in the vocal cords, the other is simply a flow air. So the same way that is pretty much just air flowing out of your mouth, is air just flowing out of your mouth, except with a different makhraj. So just air, activity of the vocal cords, activity of the vocal cords. You're not changing anything, in my personal opinion, in the makhraj. It's exactly the same. Exactly the same sound, exactly the same articulation point. The only thing that is changing is the activity of the vocal cords, as well as obviously characteristics, but we won't get into that. So the zay, for example, is not one of the letters of hams. The sin is. They're both letters of safir, but one is letter of hams, the sin, and one is not. So to say that again then, technically there's three examples of where it's simply just air flowing and there's an activity of the vocal cords. Two that actually exist in Arabic language, the sin and the zay, the tha and the dhal. And there's one, the fake one, because the alternative doesn't actually exist in Arabic, the tha and the va. So whilst the v does not exist in Arabic, it is still exactly the same logic. So if you listen carefully, as, the only difference is the activity of the vocal cords. As, f, the fact that there is more sound in the latter one of the two pairs that for each group changes the pressure where the exit point is, despite the tongue having the same position. طيب, hopefully that's clear. The sin and the sad, once again, the only thing that differs or that makes one distinct from the other is the back of the tongue, whilst this is more the position for the sin. Currently this is more of the sin position. This would be more of a sad position, and obviously just changing that characteristic changes the letter completely, and it's a very common mistake that a sad is pronounced as a sin and the sin is pronounced as a sad. And the same thing with the ta and the ta and the zal and the dha. Changing one to the other, one of the main differences between each two is the fact that one is heavy and one isn't. One has the tongue at the back high, the other does not. So s, sa, su, si, s. The only difference between that sound and the sad is the position of the tongue. صا صو صي أص سا صا سو صو سي صي S, else. As you can see, my lips are staying still. I'm not saying else. That's a common mistake. It's a common mistake that is made with all of the heavy letters, specifically with the sad and the ra as well, but the sad specifically. People say sad, si, su. Obviously, the pouting action would happen with the dhamma, but that's the only time it is permissible to happen. It does not happen with the fatha or the kasra. You would not say sad or si. No. Sa, su, si. A perfect sa without the lips getting involved at all. Those are the 10 sub-articulation points of the tongue, and those are the 18 letters that come from the tongue. Hopefully it was made clear where each one of them comes from and why each one is distinct from the other, even when they became close, like the ta, ta, dal, and the tha, tha, wa, and the za, sin, sad. And inshallah ta'ala, from next lesson, we'll be discussing the final articulation faculty, ألا وهي الشفتان, the two lips. والله تعالى أعلم وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والحمد لله رب العالمين.